unfortunately, so I will thank again Francesca and Ambra and ask Valentina to take over.
Thank you, Francesca and Ambra, for this amazing presentation. And so it's now the turn of Samuele Davide Molli, from postdoc researcher at the Catholic University of Milan. So Samuele, please switch on your camera and prepare for sharing your slides. Samuele, as I said, is postdoctoral researcher in sociology at the Catholic University of Milan, and is going to present his paper on migration, religion, and integration, evidence from a study on ethnic churches in Milan and London. Samuele, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello to everyone. I'm very glad for this opportunity. So in this talk, I will present the relationship between religion, immigration, and integration. This presentation represents a part of a study I did during my PhD experience. And for discussing this relationship, I consider the case of ethnic churches, which are churches established by Christian immigrants, both in the city of Milan and London. So in this talk, I present three main themes. The first one relates to the role of religion in the lives of immigrants in terms of cultural identity. So our religion creates a cultural atmosphere in which migrants can mutually recognize. Then, starting from my fieldwork and starting from the storyline I was able to collect during my fieldwork, I show the function of religion for migrants. Then I present how migrants within their community create an alternative form of welfare. So a set of helps that are pivotal for the needs of the members. So in this way, I conclude giving you a picture on how religion becomes a significant part of migration experience and how it can contribute to their integration. And I will also show the critics and the limits of this experience. So in terms of literature about the role of religion within migration studies, it's important to underline two considerations that have generally influenced the Italian and also the European research. The first one is that religion is a topic generally neglected within migration studies. And this is due to the long-term implications of the theory of secularization. So for most times, scholars and researchers believe that migrants would abandon their religiosity within a postmodern society. And the second belief relates to the issue of Islam in Europe. So we know how Islamic religion today represents a burning issue. And most people today believe that immigrants in Italy, as well as in Europe, are only Muslim. On the contrary, the majority of immigrants in Italy, but also in several European countries, are Christians. So I propose two lines of research for capturing the role of religion within migration studies, two views in which the study of religion can be advanced. The first one is a descriptive view, because we see the genesis of a new super diverse religious pluralism in Europe. So the religious landscape is more complex than our perception, and there are new religious faith communities on one side imported in Europe by immigrants, but we have also new religious communities founded by immigrants within our mainstream historical denomination. For example, we have new Protestant churches, new evangelical churches, new Catholic churches communities. On the other side, we have two interpretative ways we use, sorry. The first one I call from inside, And this is the role of religion in migration experience at the individual level in terms of well-being, in terms of psychological benefits, in terms of cultural identity. And the second one comes from outside, so the social, political, and civic implication of migrant religiosity, mostly in terms of integration within our society. Here we see case studies and methodology. In particular, I studied religious communities established by Catholic immigrants both in the city of Milan and London. So we know that these two cities are global socioeconomic hubs, but we also see new significant religious processes triggered by migration flows. So the multiculturalism we see is also a question of religion. In particular, for example, in Milan, we know that Catholicism is the mainstream religion, but today we see as a significant part of believers are immigrants, and they are silently replacing native-born believers. In London, I can affirm as Catholicism is only a matter of immigrants. We know Catholicism in England is a minority, and today this minority is renewed only by immigrants. So during my fieldwork, I was able to collect 75 in-depth interviews with believers and with religious responsible. And I collected ethnographic data because I had an immersive experience within their religious and social activities for 3 years. And I was also able to collect a rich set of visual data. In particular, here, I can show you a picture I took during my fieldwork in Milan, and it represents a religious item pivotal for most Latin American in the city. It represents one of the most important sanctuary within the city of Milan, where Latin Americans gather on Sunday. Here we can see how around this religious icon, people gather on Sunday and create a communitarian experience. Similarly, here we have a picture. It represents a religious item pivotal for Brazilians in the city of London, where I did my fieldwork with them. And around these people meet and have created one of the most important immigrant community, one of the most important newest immigrant community in the city of London. So in this way, I can show you as religion represent also a set of cultural markers, and thanks to them, migrants create an atmosphere where they can mutually recognize a familiar place within a new unfamiliar place. So religions transform in a tool to reproducing and inventing identity. It's like a cultural glue between the mother country and the receiving society. Moreover, migrants typically in these two cities transform marginal areas into lively places, because we have a lot of old churches abandoned by local believers, and migrants transform these marginal areas, abandoned churches, into new religious communities. And finally, I can show you how these religious places are not only religious places, but they become social landmarks within the city, meeting points where they can gather in Milan and London. So in this slide, I show you classification, and we can find how churches can provide different types of helps. Churches, these are only ideal types, but they can help us to understand the role of churches for them for migrants and their lives. So on the left, you can find common topics and themes emerged during the interviews with migrants. And on the right, you can find the function that churches are able to give to members. So in the first line, within boxes, we find issues like loneliness, the need of a new family, the sense of solitude, and the church provides a space where migrants may find psychological answers that typically they don't find within everyday life and activities. So religion provides a peaceful space different from ordinary life, where to develop a new set of relations. In the second line, during the interviews, I often found themes like the everyday stress linked to obligation, the anxiety of living for a long period in a new and different context, as well as tensions linked to mother country. We know that migrants often have relatives in the mother country, and this creates expectations and also stress. So the church serves for them as a space of resilience where they can soften this different form of stress. Here in this line, in the first line, we find a different and more active function. We know that migrants face often job exploitation, stigma, and mostly legal and political exclusion. We can imagine the situation of irregulars. And in this case, migrants within their community create and find strategies of survival. So the concept of resistance is different from resilience, which is more passive. Resistance is more active because migrants within their communities can create strategies of survival, and they are externally excluded but internally included. In the second line, we find how migrants within their community can also present a new image of themselves, a different image from the ordinary and everyday obligations implicating their jobs activity that typically require low skills. So the participation often involves the development of new position of responsibility, and migrants can become leaders of their groups because we find different groups within the churches. This is an informal social mobility for them, who can experience new position and develop new organizational skills within these churches. And this is another important psychological benefit. Finally, another perspective to elaborate the religious involvement is to understand the moral attitudes implicated. So migrants within these churches look for a moral guide and a new moral orientation. They look for compasses to soften the impact of a new secular and postmodern society. So they can...
Samuele, sorry to interrupt you. You have 3 minutes.
Sorry?
You have
okay,
3 minutes.
so I go.
Thank you.
So they want to present and to show the churches as a deserved setting, a different image from what people tend to think about migrants as dirty and dangerous places. So the churches are a set when they can develop an image of respectability for the city. So because during the research I have observed as migrants within the communities create a different set of mutual helps, a wide set of services able to sustain their material needs. So here we have a set of these forms of help, because over the time they create internal groups for the reception of forced arrivals. They create formal help desk for the guidance and for legal needs, food banks and other informal agency for their jobs and information about housing. So the churches moreover often sponsor fundraising to collect financial resources for help the believers in case of material needs. We can think to the health assistance, the medical assistance, or for people who lost their jobs during their experience as migrants. Moreover, believers tend to help each other, also for the family support, for example, to provide childcare to the people who work all the day. So to conclude, I can claim that religious communities over the time become an alternative informal welfare for them in order to support their needs and their settlement in a new society. So yeah, the conclusion, so I can claim that so religious communities try to support migrants during their new experience. They transform in cultural, psychological, social, and welfare hubs in Milan and London. But it's important to underline as religion is not a panacea comparing to the structural disadvantage, but they try to support their integration within the city. And so the challenge evolution, not only so the activities sponsored within the communities, but also the integration in the city, the civic evolution, and also the role of the second generation. And it's important to understand if religion will be a part of the inclusion or exclusion in Milan and London. So I can finish here. And thanks, Valentina.
Thank you, Samuele. Thank you so much for your amazing presentation. Every time I heard your presentation, I feel very happy, and I'm very happy, and I want to share with you this feeling of happiness because we had today very quantitative analysis, some qualitative studies, and then intersection between the two, and also experimental studies. And I really think that this is the way to go for science in the future. So thank you so much for your presentation and for the presentations we heard today. We have a question from the audience. So Juan, if you want to switch your camera on and ask your question, please feel free.
Sure, but I think Professor Ambrosini was first.
No problem.
Yes,
no
sorry,
problem, Juan Francisco, please.
Okay, thank you. Now, I had one question because, well, actually, Professor Ambrosini is also well aware of the role of organization of migrants, providing a lot of the services you described and what you described as the welfare from below, which I think is an amazing term. So my main question would be, what is the added value of a religious organization versus non-religious organizations, specifically in the topic that you have analyzed? There are indeed non-religious organizations of Latin Americans also organized in different parts of Europe. What would be the added value of the religious one?
So during my fieldwork, I was able to collect data on the fact that religious communities tend to create an atmosphere where a mutual trust can be advanced for their relationship in terms of social capital, for example. So religion is a typical setting where people can create this, reinforce the mutual trust between people because the religious values are able to create this atmosphere and is a form of sociability. So yeah, I did a qualitative study only within churches, but starting from my data, I'm able to give you a picture of how people within this community find a mutual recognition because there is a common atmosphere. And starting from here, they can create, develop relation, mutual trust, and then starting from here, they can create a wide set of helps. So I think that religion is another interesting platform, a communitarian experience to elaborate in order to understand how people develop their relationship within our society. And so this is what I can tell you. But there are also several implications starting from religion. So.
No, thank you. That indeed clarifies. Thank you.
Sorry, Professor Ambrosini, you can go. I didn't.
No problem.
Sorry.
No problem. My question is about the transnational dimension of religious communities. Some literature has analyzed as religious communities provide connections with the homeland through pilgrimage, for instance, through visits of religious leaders and so on. And one aspect very interesting is their role in collecting collective remittances for social purposes in the homeland, for instance, in the occasion of natural disasters or emergencies. I think that in this way, especially religious communities are able to develop a bridge with the homeland that often is difficult to construct for other types of immigrant associations and groups. In this way, I think I can also answer to Juan Francisco. The collective organization of immigrants is difficult in Italy. Associations are weaker than in other countries in Europe. And I think that religious communities represent a kind of exception or an anticipation of a collective activity by immigrants in our country. Please.
I can give you a picture on this because in a small part of my PhD thesis, I wrote a chapter on transnational activities sponsored by these churches. In particular, there is a paragraph on what we can call as a transnational welfare from below. So the idea that churches sponsor forms of helps for the settlement of immigrants, but they typically get, meet and collect resources and forms of helps also for the homeland. And these resources are able to directly meet the needs of their relatives, for example. So the welfare has also this side. So we can call this as a transnational welfare from below.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, the time is over, but this amazing conversation can continue in parallel. So thank you so much, Samuele, for your amazing presentation. Thank you so much for the questions coming from the audience.